On today's episode of Locked On Wild, the bill is coming due soon for Brock Faber and Marco Rossi, plus Declan Chisholm if the Wild elect to keep him around too. So how much are we paying?
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast platforms or both, wherever you tune in, whether it be on your phone, on your laptop, in the car, on the go, or on the couch. We thank you for tuning in each and every day of the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, Zach Zeman joins us as we discuss potential contract extensions for Brock Faber, Marco Rossi, and Declan Chisholm. What sort of dollar value are we looking at? And I have a radical idea for the Brock Faber extension. We'll talk about that too. My name is Seth Topol, your daily Minnesota Wild insider. As mentioned, the band is back together. Zach Zeman is joining us. Zach, welcome back.
It's good to be back, man. The off season is underway. It's been underway for a minute. Locked On Wild, the best off-season content on the planet. It's so good to be here, back in Minnesota, done with college. It's a new start, new beginning, and man, the Wild got some stuff to take care of soon.
Yeah, they got a few questions that are going to need to be answered here this offseason. Now, as we talked about a little bit yesterday, one of them does not include a rebrand to the alternate colors for 2025-2026. We had a little bit of a false alarm on that front. We'll talk about that before the end of the show today. But I did want to talk about the potential upcoming contract extensions for Brock Faber, Marco Rossi, and Declan Chisholm once again, because, look, we all know the pocketbooks for the Minnesota Wild are a little on the tight side, and they're going to need to work. They should be looking to work these guys in, especially in Rossi and Faber's case, to the long-term plans. And so, what that looks like from a year or a dollar perspective, we're going to try to get to the bottom of that. But let's just get right into my radical idea, Zach, because it will not happen. It will not happen. But I want people to hear me out, because I feel like from a business perspective as a general manager, this probably makes the most sense. And I look at what we have defensively, Zach. We've got Jonas Brodin, $6 million per year through 2027, 2028. We got Jared Spurgeon, $7.575 million through 2026, 2027. It's a lot of money tied into just two players defensively. You've got Jake Middleton on the books. You got Zach Bogosian on the books. You got Jon Merrill on the books for now. My idea, hear me out. If I was general manager of the Minnesota Wild, I would look to sign Brock Faber initially to a shorter term deal. I know the prevailing thought is that he's going to get an 8-year deal. He's going to get as much as the Wild can give him right off the top at somewhere around $9 million per season. Me, I would do something to try to get through Jared Spurgeon's contract and then revisit. Zach, am I crazy?
Yeah, it's not something I've thought of. I don't know, but it's valid. Also, never say never, because it could happen. My current thought is, it's just blank check, blank everything. It's all on Faber. This is his contract, and what comes to my mind first is how he's like Minnesota, Mr. Minnesota. Like,
right.
Everything I've seen is screaming that he would like to be here in my hopes for a very long time. And with a steady long-term deal, and which I think that's actually going to happen. But I don't think you're crazy, because if that Spurgeon contract ends he's unrestricted free agent in 27-28, and Faber's ends around that time, then I guess you could decide which one you want to, what the money would go to there. And I guess the players would eventually understand. But right now, I just do think that it's going to be, the 8-year, $8 million. Like, I swear, I think it's a check. And you know what? It could be a team-friendly deal too. I just view Faber as that guy. Just an outstanding year of hockey for him. This is exactly what the Wild needed. Spurgeon goes down early. Faber filled that role very well, if not better, arguably. And it's the greatest story of the year. The Wild would have been nothing without Brock Faber this year. So he's going to get as much money as he wishes. It was clear. He was in charge for a lot of games. He was on the ice for a third of every game. And, the money's going to come, and it's on him for the tenure for sure. But I do think he wants to be here for a long time, and that's the only thing that I disagree with. But, you never know until you know, and I think it's going to be long, and it's going to be worth a lot of money.
Yeah, it is. And again, this is why this is just me playing NHL 24 as Minnesota Wild GM, where you can basically force every trade through, can trade first-round picks. I traded a first-round pick for Jon Merrill straight up, and they allowed it. Now, obviously, I might have forced that one, but look, all the things that Brock Faber does, he contributes. He's your quarterback on the power play. He plays on the penalty kill. He played top defenseman minutes all season. He averaged just under, he played 30 minutes a night a handful of times, which was something that was just nobody else on this team did. He was in the top 5 in minutes as a rookie. And all of these things go in his favor. He's a Calder Trophy finalist. He is also a rapidly developing leader on this team. Like, you look at the number of times that he was asked questions after games. He stood at the podium after bad losses. If he wouldn't have said anything, we wouldn't have known that he played the final 2 months of the season with broken ribs. Yeah. Like, he didn't say a word about it. And so those are all things that go in his favor for the higher value. Now, me playing kind of the agent side of things, here's a big reason as to why this might be tantalizing for him and his agent. Cale Makar, his current deal is done in 2026, 2027. And so if you are, like, we see this in the NFL all the time with quarterbacks, you may sign a deal with the hopes that a few quarterbacks reset the market while your deal is in place so that you can cash in again once it's done. Cale Makar could very likely go at age 28 to being a double-digit million per year defenseman for the Colorado Avalanche. And yes, if you compare the two, his offensive game is way ahead of Brock Faber's right now. But here's the thing. Brock Faber certainly has plenty of room to develop into that. So if you're Brock Faber's agent, you got to at least think about the potential for your next deal after this bridge deal is done. You got to at least think about the possibility that you then could also be in line for some sort of a payday in that avenue when you would be 24. And here's the other part of it. If you were 24 and signed an 8-year deal, takes you till 32, you still have time for another contract after that. Mm-hmm. So it's not likely to happen, but I have at least done enough work right here to talk myself into it being a possibility. And again, just from a savvy businessman perspective, I just like lining it up with another contract coming off the books and then putting the money back on once they're both off.
Yeah. And to your defense, like a lot of these rookie deals are short term for the prove it years. Like we're going to give you X amount of money, but if you go above and beyond during that contract, then you're obviously going to get rewarded with more, and we're going to listen to you more. But I feel like Faber just has already done that. I mean, it's just clear night and day. Like I'll say it again, the Wild were nothing without him. They would have been nothing without him. And so I'm thinking like the $4.5 million expansion next season in the salary cap, and then you get the empty cap from Parise and Suter back. So the Wild are finally going to be able to breathe with some money, and are going to be able to like make some moves, which is really exciting. I feel like we've been just constantly talking about the drag of what's been going on contract wise or salary cap wise with the Wild. And it's been a lot, but finally we're starting to breathe a little bit. And I think that the salary cap expansion, along with getting that money spent on Parise and Suter back, oh man, it does feel good. And I feel like it's going to happen at a perfect time where Faber's going to get paid right when that money comes back, and the Wild are going to be like, oh, all right. It's just like it always was, but except you get another $9 million to give away to your other players. So finally some cap breathability, if that's even a word, maybe
I will allow it. I will allow breathability into the wordosphere. See, I made one up too. It happens. So
awesome.
It should be interesting for Faber because I as of July 1st, that can get going. It would not surprise me at all if as soon as that window opens, the Wild try to get something done almost immediately, just to get it done, just to get it off the books. But again, savvy businessman perspective. Mm-hmm. Now, on the shorter term deal, you may not be saving really anything other than just years. And so if the money's going to be similar, it probably makes sense to just go with the long-term approach. But I don't know. It made sense in my head, so I figured it might as well be worth mentioning on these airwaves. So
absolutely.
We go from that one to a contract that is going to be a little trickier to figure out. We'll talk about what prospects Marco Rossi has, if he's not traded, for getting a bridge deal or beyond, as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Game Time. The NBA Finals are in full swing. Have you ever thought about going to a game yourself? Well, Game Time can make it a possibility, and they can help you get those NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on Game Time usually go down the closer you get to tip-off. And with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. You can also let Game Time help you out with their zone deals. You can save when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we are your team every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Hang around after the show today for the first of its kind 24/7 streaming channel. Locked On Sports Today has all of your favorite Locked On hosts with all of the biggest news from the sporting world throughout the day. And the hosts don't yell at each other. No screaming. So make sure to check it out. Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or the Amazon Fire Channels app. 24/7. All the sports you can handle. And it's actual, well thought out stuff, as opposed to just sitting at a desk yelling at the other hosts. None of that. So make sure to check that out. Zach, let's talk Marco Rossi. because not only is Brock Faber in line for an extension, Marco Rossi's in line for an extension too. And despite the continued chatter, although it seems like it has died down a little bit, the potential Rossi trade chatter, it seems like it has kind of cooled slightly, which I hope is a good sign. But Rossi eligible for an extension. From what I have heard, it seems more likely that he gets a bridge deal just to kind of see how he does over the next couple of years before the Wild would re-up to him again. What do you think about the possibility of giving Rossi, let's just say, a 3-year deal? Let's just say, for all intents and purposes, a 3-year deal to stick around in Minnesota.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what I was thinking of, before we started recording. And we asked the fans, on May 28th, we sent out a tweet, Locked On Wild, about Marco Rossi's report card. 77% of fans said it was a B, in the B range, and 23% said it was an A. Nobody said C, D, or F, which is something really interesting to note. Last offseason we were talking, I felt like every episode on how big of a year this is for Marco Rossi. And it's got 21 goals, one of only 2 players to play all 82 games. And so that's a lot. That's saying a lot for Marco Rossi. Obviously, he's been a very interesting history with injuries and all that jazz. And, Marco Rossi, that story is just incredible. And for him to be up here right now playing for the Wild is honestly amazing to see. And that's exactly what I've been looking at too. Just get him a bridge deal. It wasn't the best year. Like it was just on par for what I guess was expected, to say the least. There really wasn't like super high expectations, but I guess the expectations were, oh my gosh, if he's really good, the Wild are going to be really good. And then like, that just kind of is what the Wild rode with going into the year. When in reality, it was like, all right, well, he's only been here for a year or 2 prior. Like, let's just chill out and let him, acclimate to the NHL and get him into these games. And, that's just all you can ask for him. And I completely agree with that. And I think that, the bridge deal would ideally, in my mind, be a great solution for where he's at right now. Let him really get those games in and figure out, his role. And I think that's what the Wild would love to see right now. And I don't think it'll be a long-term deal. But yeah, Rossi's still got work to do, in my opinion. And I think the fans agree with that. But this year was, he is who we thought he was, I guess.
Yeah, it was a good step in the right direction. From a statistical standpoint, I feel like if you would have had, and we've talked about this on this show at length, and so we don't need to go down the Marcus Johansson road again. If there would have been more competent or more consistent line mates on that second line, I feel like he goes from a 20 goal, 40-point guy to a 25 goal, 50-point guy, or a 25 goal, 60-point guy, or a 30 goal, 60-point guy. And this is interesting too. I'm going to use, listeners will find that I use cap friendly a lot more here in the short term until it gets taken offline by the Washington Capitals. If Rossi gets a 3-year deal, that puts him here longer than Freddie Gaudreau, Ryan Hartman, Marcus Foligno, Matt Zuccarello, and Kirill Kaprizov. The only players that would still be on the roster offensively would be Matt Boldy and Joel Eriksson-Ek, depending on what happens with the likes of Murat Kuznetsov, Liam Ugrin, some of those prospects. But I do find it interesting that the Wild have an opportunity to have him be part of that next wave for this franchise, as opposed to kind of having his time come as it will with the old guard, as I'm going to call it. I don't know why we didn't go with that nickname earlier, but I'm just going to call all the extensions, all the no move clauses, the old guard. Just gonna start that today. We're just going to call them the old guard going forward. And so there's an opportunity to have Rossi be part of the future to outlast the old guard. It comes down to the AAV, really. Honestly, for me, like he's making $863,000 this season. So do you put him at like 2.5?
Yeah.
This is the part of the gig that I just am not super strong with is contract estimations, but Freddie Gaudreau's making 2.1. How much more valuable than Freddie Gaudreau is Marco Rossi? It's a lot.
Right.
So,
I think, yeah, even like Johansson's contract right now is $2 million flat. And I think with the cap expansion, directly this year, stuff could happen. I think the general contract AAV for everyone in the league, this is what it's meant for, will go up. So it's just there's going to be a redefining number or base value for third liners versus first liners. And, we're going to start to see first liners get paid, double digit $1 million, 10, 11 mil. It's going to be more common.
Yep.
And then we're going to start to see third liners and second liners like Rossi, probably where $3 million might just be the base moving forward. And, with inflation, that just happens. And it's hard to put an exact number on that right now, especially with the cap expansion.
If we go off of strict value based off of the contracts on this team right now, he probably gets 4.5.
Yeah, seriously.
Because higher than Hartman, higher than Foligno, higher than Zuccarello, probably slightly less than Eriksson Ek, Boldy, and Kaprizov. But if we're going strictly off of merit, on this team, it's probably 4.5. Now, in real world economics, I'll say between 2.5 and 3. And honestly, at $3 million, if you have a perennial 20 to 30 goal guy who plays in your top 6 and is growing, just completed his first season in the league.
Seriously.
He's going to add to that repertoire with some better help on his line. He could be a more dangerous scorer. So maybe he performs at a level that makes that contract look as big of a bargain as Joel Eriksson Ek is right now.
Yeah, I mean, and his contract is right when the salary cap comes back for the Wild. Like I keep saying, I think in my eyes, if it's over 4 flat, then it'll be kind of fishy. So I think it's right about that range.
Yeah, I think the Wild are looking at 2.5, 3 mil. 3 mil probably tops. They're probably looking at more like 2.5.
That's all right.
And then you reassess after 3 years, assuming that the team keeps him around and that they don't make good on their at least flirtation with trading him, which please don't.
Which who knows what his value is? Seriously, it could be really interesting, these offers the Wild are getting, but it's probably what do you think? What are these offers for Rossi looking like? I mean,
this is where if I'm a general manager, I set it really high. I probably go a first round pick and a prospect. You're not going to, a majority of the conversations are going to be done after your asking price, but you might get 1 or 2 general managers that at least entertain the thought, and it could lead to another conversation about other players, like just with having Rossi be the starting point.
And it's just like, can the Wild currently afford losing a player? Because the prospect pool that the Wild have right now is tremendous.
Yeah.
There are not a lot of people who can crack this lineup and work every day like Rossi can. So that just says, do the Wild really want to move away from a player guaranteed to start in their lineup, every night? We saw that last year. We brought up so many different people, and a lot of people couldn't stick up. It just couldn't happen. So there's just levels to it. And I don't think the Wild right now are looking to get rid of any players anytime soon, especially after last year's fiasco, bringing everyone up and down.
And it's the players that are being shopped, or at least are rumored to be being shopped, are the ones that you should be trying to keep and build around, because Rossi played all 82 games. He didn't even have a whisper of an injury throughout the season. And for as many injuries as the Wild sustained this past year, that means something.
Yeah.
Having 2 players get through the entirety of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I got distracted, Seth, and I looked up if breathability was a word, and it's a word.
Well, then we're good. Then breathability can stay. That'll just be the name of this podcast is breathability.
Yeah, honestly.
So We've got one more to discuss, one more player to discuss. He came on as a waiver claim and did some really good things. So we'll talk about the possibility of Declan Chisholm to stick around as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wilds after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Ultimate Hockey GM. Hey, Locked On Wild fans, I would like to take a moment to bring up one of our partners, the mobile game, Ultimate Hockey GM. Have you ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM and managing your hockey franchise? Oh, have we ever? Do you think you could run the Minnesota Wild better than Bill Guerin? I think a lot of us do. Well, your dream can come true, and this game is most definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the seasons, and lead it to glory. Hire the right coaches and staff, trade players or draft picks, navigate through free agency and the draft, all in a challenging and realistic game world. As a Wild fan, you know there is no off season. GMs are constantly making moves at every point of the year to improve their team's chances. That's why I think you're going to love this game. Folks, I will do you one better. If any of you put together a Minnesota Wild team on Ultimate Hockey GM, tell me about your experience. We will talk about it on the show. I want to hear how you do better with this team than is currently being done. Ultimate Hockey GM is completely free and playable online. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. By the way, Locked On Network listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On NHL in the game store. So make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit hockeygm.app. That's hockeygm.app, or look it up on the app stores. That's Ultimate Hockey GM. Start your Minnesota Wild dynasty today. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wilds. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. That Ultimate Hockey GM got me fired up.
Yeah.
If anybody actually does go through and put together a season, and you know I'm going to,
set up some screenshots. I want to see on Twitter what you guys are building over there, what you're cooking up.
Screenshot it. Get me on Twitter. You can also email the show, lockedonwild@gmail.com. We'll talk through all of your potential moves for this Minnesota Wild franchise. Seth Topol hanging out with Zach Zeman here for one more segment. Zach, let's talk Declan Chisholm. Chisholm was acquired from the Winnipeg Jets because evidently they were more fascinated with Logan Stanley than they were with Declan Chisholm. And all told, Chisholm in 29 games had 3 goals, 5 assists, and 8 total points. He did some really nice things on the power play. Needs some work on the defensive side. I think that's fair to say. But when you look at some of the other options that were filling up that bottom pairing, Alex Goligoski, Jon Merrill, and the likelihood, at least according to Russo, that Dakota Mermis is not likely to return to the organization, seems like a good fit to plug in on that third pairing and to just continue to grow as a player. Seems like a sharp kid, and seems like he is a quick study. So as far as a deal goes here, I'd probably do something similar to what Jon Merrill got, 2 or 3 year deal for $1.2 million per season. Slight raise over what he got last year, and gives him the opportunity to stay in this system and to just continue to grow.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be an interesting year. Spurgeon's coming back. That's a big defensive boost. Current big defensive boost, and I think that you got Goligoski probably retiring. I'm assuming
he will. He will.
And I just think of the current state of the Wild. I think they just need players, and I think Chisholm's that great little piece to keep. Clearly they got him last year because of Spurgeon's absence and a lot of other things. And he did just what we brought him in for. Obviously, this guy, I think he was doing some stuff with Manitoba, the Moose, and then, Winnipeg. So he's up and down. And yeah, I think he just fit the role that he clearly needed to fit with the Wild. Not a lot what the Wild could do, limited on cap at the time. So, Now, since they're not, I think you got to re-sign him. Obviously, he's a player. He's already here. He's got experience. It's the safe, reliable pick to re-sign him and keep him just for that nick of time.
It's interesting because I think he is viewed in a much similar light as Calen Addison was, as a guy who really has some good things that he does offensively, work in progress on defense, but I feel like his tenure just went much better than any of Addison's tenure did. Yes, Addison racked up a ton of assists, but he was like when you're playing Madden as a cornerback and you're trying to play like by yourself as opposed to letting the cornerback cover the receiver, and you just get torched every play. Like that, it was like watching somebody who just was in between on defense, like every time he was in position to make a play. And it was just so weird having all that talk about, he hasn't been going to any of the vets to try to get advice on like what to do, and having Jared Spurgeon come out and say, yeah, I never talked to me once. That just was weird to me. Like it's probably way overblown and it's probably not as big of a deal, but the fact that it even was mentioned just struck me as odd. And we just didn't get any of that with Chisholm. He seemed like he was legitimately happy to be here, a nice fit in the clubhouse, and just seemed silky smooth on that power play. So I'm hugely in favor of keeping him around, and he is leagues better than what previously occupied that third pairing that I would hope to never see again in any capacity in either of those spots.
He definitely understood his role. I think that was just the basic synopsis of his year. The 29 games with the Wild. It was needed. The Wild needed a quick fix, and he was there. And I think that if you get him re-signed again, it'll definitely carry on.
We will we'll have to wait and see how that plays out there. Now, from a comment perspective, just looking at our listener question from yesterday. What would you consider the biggest need for the Wild in this year's draft? I'm going to go with Isaac Johnson here. If I was the Wild, I would draft Cole Yzerman at 13 if he's there. I've seen reports that he's been dropping in the draft, but he's got a great shot and is known for scoring goals. Now, he might have some other deficiencies like his defense, but Isaac feels like with the right coaching, he could be turned into a good player, and this Wild team needs guys in the top 6 that can score and shoot the puck, and Yzerman does. Bingo. Elite ad for the comment on our listener question. Now, for today's question, how many years? No, what will the AAV be for Brock Faber's extension? That is today's listener question.
Should we set an over-under?
Let's set an over-under.
8 flat.
Okay.
I think 8 flat.
Will Brock Faber's extension be over or under 8 million AAV? That is today's listener question. Comment on today's episode with your thoughts, and best comment will lead off tomorrow's episode. And tomorrow we got a 2-parter for you, by the way, because listen to this. Isha's joining us for his usual Friday spot. We are going through every single year of Minnesota Wild hockey and picking a player to put into an ultimate roster.
It's the best.
One player from every team. It's going to be a 2-parter. It's going to be meaty. There's going to be a ton of strategy involved. Don't miss it. That'll be Friday's show for you. Perfect way to go into Father's Day weekend. And let's be honest, Locked On Wild always puts you in the right mindset for the weekend. So make sure to tune in for that tomorrow. Make sure to hit that like button on today's episode so you don't miss out on any new content from Locked On Wild. If you are feeling up to it, leave us a 5-star review on your favorite audio platforms. It helps with the reach of the show, and it helps expand Locked On Wild's reach throughout the state of Minnesota and the globe. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.